I think it does give the wrong impression because it makes girls, at that point, it gives an impression that in order for someone to like you or to have that love from a boy, there's going to be some sort of abuse in the relationship.
Yeah, I think that as they get older, that kind of teaches them that if you end up being in like a physically abusive relationship, that you still learn that that's okay. It just teaches us that it's okay to take these unhealthy tendencies as, oh, he just likes me, like no big deal, part of the relationship.
As I got older, I realized that it was not true when someone's mean to you or if a boy is picking on a girl. I think the older it is, the more that you actually obviously understand and acknowledge and realize that you're open to versus when you're a kid, you just don't know any different.
Just watching relationships, like either with my cousins or my parents. I think kids are so easily, how do I say, they're taught things so easily, like they'll pick up on anything so easily. So I think it was just studying relationships, PDA, all that stuff. Like, I just learned that romance was everything from the movies.
Someone who's controlling, disrespectful, I would say has insane, unrealistic boundaries versus isolation. Not allowed to let you around your friends and family, contact them, and has to know your every move and who you're talking to.
Possessiveness, especially when it seems like you two are not living separate lives and it's like your life is only their life. Of course, being verbally abusive, manipulating situations into them making you think it's your fault.
You don't care, so you bring it on yourself.
Obviously, physical abuse, emotional abuse, cutting you off from your friends and your family, making you think that they are the only one that matters.
I have.
Yeah, I was in one for about almost 2 years.
The isolation and I didn't mention this before, inconsistencies, like saying you're okay with one thing and then that one thing happening, spending time with friends and family, saying you're completely okay with it, going back home to your spouse and that spouse freaking out because you did exactly what they said was okay when really it wasn't, so contradicting. There was verbal abuse, um very a lot of belittling going on and just hateful things said that make you feel worthless.
Answer back to Tully.
Like I said, that is all you do.
Why are you so mad right now?
Because you are a sack of shit liar.
It started with really little things, like when our relationship first started, I started to realize that everything was on his own time. So whenever we wanted to hang out, it was only what worked with his schedule. Like, I was constantly changing around things to make sure that I could see him because that was the only time that worked for him. It was a lot of dismissing me, like if we were hanging out and he's like, okay, you can leave now. And at first I was like, oh, he's okay, he's busy, he wants to go to bed, whatever. But then that just started to progress. It was like everything. And then I really started to notice things were not normal when we wouldn't ever leave his house. Like, I would take him to events that my friends are having, if we were hanging out, whatever, but I was never taken out to like family events of his or hanging out with his friends or being introduced to his life, really. And that's when I noticed things. That was like the beginning of when things were not right.
Yes, your demeanor changes, your personality changes. Friends and family notice when you start isolating yourself, when you start being more paranoid about your actions, even though you're not doing anything wrong, but saying you have to be somewhere at a specific time, you can't make it to a family function.
Oh, yes, my best friend and my mom definitely, it was like all the time. they're like, you're really, like, you're changing your life for this guy. Like, I change into a completely different person. Like, I'm gonna do my thing, no matter what anyone else says or thinks about it. But with him, I was always doing what he wanted me to do. I was a very passive person. I was a major pushover. Like, anything he said went, even if it wasn't okay with it. I was like, okay, yeah, for sure. And my mom was always, every single day, because I come home crying, and she's like, you need to do something about this. Like, you need to talk to him. You need to let him know your feelings on the situation.
I think there's a lot of things that come into play with that, why women stay in those relationships. One would have to be they are in love per se with that person. They feel like they can change them. They don't want to just up and leave that person. They have hope and faith that they'll change and that person will become better. Also, they're stuck in it thinking that without that person they're worthless, or if they've been belittled so much, that female does not think anything of themselves, that they deserve anything better. So they deserve the way they're getting treated. Maybe they are the bad ones in the relationship. Maybe they do deserve to be treated like crap, when that's not the case at all. They've just been psychologically damaged.
For me, this was the first guy I was ever in love with. The thing is, I recognize all these things he was doing, and I realized that they weren't right. But in my mind, I'm like, I like him so much. Like, I don't want to break things off, because, like, I still want to see him every day. Like, even though it was so toxic, it was just, I still wanted to be around him. And I think love is toxic within itself because of that. Even though it wasn't a good relationship, it was comfortable because I had gotten so used to it, and it was hard to leave that.
If we're talking about males specifically being toxic to the female, that the male feels like they have the control and power of the relationship, and they start to become abusive in any possible way or create toxicity in the relationship when the female's vulnerable. They take a vulnerable situation and then take the control of it. So
No, it's not you want to talk your little fucking mental nut job game.
There's like financial abuse, physical abuse, emotional, mental. It's such a broad spectrum, I guess, that there's not one specific form of abuse that determines if it's toxic or not, you know?
just dealing with my life in general, residual anxiety from that toxic relationship. I'm a lot more cautious now when it comes to red flags of meeting people, of paranoias, and that, like I said, anxiety, and it almost has you traumatized to where you're afraid to, because you don't want to be damaged again.
Listen to your friends and your family. They can really see what's going on more than you can. If you notice things are wrong and you don't want to do anything because you think you're in love with him, like, do what's best for yourself. Like, if you know this is not good for your mental health, if you're totally changing your life for a person, like, just take a step back and look at yourself from an outsider's point of view.
To just know it's okay to leave. You don't have to fix someone. It's okay to leave, to keep yourself healthy, better yourself, and get out of that toxic relationship, because if they're toxic to you, they've probably been toxic before you, and they're going to be toxic after you. Just make sure you take care of yourself. You need to keep yourself healthy and safe.